We are streaming live from the ECOSOC Youth Chamber for the Youth Forum at the UN headquarters, New York. This session will focus on what young people are doing for climate action. Today with us we have Shaquille Knowles from the Caribbean Regional Youth Council, Steve Lee from the Foundation for Environmental Stewardship, and the moderator for today's session, Vanessa Hill. You now have the floor.
Great, thank you very much. It's such a privilege to be here today with so many accomplished young leaders in the climate space. I have some questions for both of you over the next 15 minutes, but first of all, I just wanted to start off with a big picture question. What motivates both of you to take climate action? What keeps you up at night?
What keeps you up at night? Okay, what motivates me to be involved with climate change is to better my community. You know, being from a small island developing state, we're very vulnerable to climate change, whether it be the hurricanes or sea level rising. And I think in the past, in my lifetime, I've seen where climate change has definitely affected my country, not only my country, myself, but also my region, where there's instances where one hurricane can totally wipe out an entire country's GDP. Seen in last year's hurricane season. So I think that's what keeps me up at night, is like this one, say, force or one natural force may come to my country or come to my region one day and wipe it out from what we may know of it yesterday. So I think it's one of my missions for what keeps me up at night with climate change, is just to better my country and safeguard my country from climate change and its detrimental effects.
Steve, what's the driving force behind why you do what you do?
I think he really captured the urgent reality of climate crisis. But what really, other than that side, what also gets me worried, or I guess excited, is that climate change for the first time is humanity's first truly global systematic challenge. And I'm quite excited by how we will overcome this challenge through creating a new partnerships, a new framework of challenging global issues that will be essential for leveraging the fourth industrial revolution, for leveraging different types of challenges and opportunities that will come through achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that's what I'm most concerned with, because if we can't adequately come up with capacity to deal with a global challenge like climate change, then we may not be able to rise above different systematic challenges that we will face in the next few decades.
Sure. Now, Shaquille, you have just stepped into your role as the chairman for the Caribbean Regional Youth Council. I'm wondering how young people can be the generation that stops climate change.
I think young people could be the generation to stop climate change by simply being involved. You know, I think our government have a big responsibility in educating our young people in terms of the SDGs and now how they can play a role in accomplishing or achieving our SDGs, and not only just playing a role, but just basically being a part of the policy making or policy-driven processes, you know. And in the instance where we might see our government officials attending the UN for different meetings and speaking towards climate change, this is now then our opportunities to encourage them, not only encourage them, but also be a part of the discussion as well, and actually promote climate change at meetings like this, UN ECOSOC. So at all levels, to ensure that climate change is a topic of discussion, it's seen as a priority, to ensure that climate change is going to be gone, hopefully not gone, but fixed in the future.
Why is it important to have a youth council?
It's important to have a youth council because the youth council serves as a organization network. So youth council tends to serve as a training body of different grassroots level organizations. And as a youth council as well is important because there may not be an instance where you can have, say, 15 different countries sit on this one stage to speak about climate change. So in essence, you may have that one person who have a true perspective in terms of what the 15 countries would see as priorities, to then be able to speak on their behalf, if not just on this stage, but also the meeting table as well. So that's one of the many reasons why it's important to have a national council. So to serve as an advocacy body, a training body, and also a representative to actually speak in terms of what's the ideals for the entire Caribbean, and also who's able to then speak to the Pacific ideals of different countries as well.
I guess similar to that, Steve, you're the director of the Foundation for Environmental Stewardship. What are the advantages of having a youth-led organization?
That's an excellent question. We in fact,
Thank you.
Yesterday had a side event, part of the ECOSOC Youth Forum, challenging exactly that question. What does it mean to be a youth-led organization, and is an exclusively youth-led organization even beneficial? And kind of the outcome, or kind of the pattern that rose from that is, there is no definite answer that we've concluded yet, but the consensus seems to be that there is a space for youth-led entities or movements to really be a space, an unadulterated space that can voice the opinion and the views of young people. But it's very important for intergenerational partnership and co-creation with different entities and across the generations, so that we're also receiving mentorship and advice, and really weaving that views together in a way that's not just impacting children and youth, but across the generations as well, and for future generations who are not here. Yeah.
Right, so there's definitely an advantage in having youth-led organizations, but then also working intergenerationally with other organizations too.
Right, exactly. I mean, well, one of the good examples that even for youth-led organizations, for example, I'd be part of the incoming secretariat for the Major Group for Children and Youth, which is a General Assembly mandated entity within the UN system for engagement mechanism for children and youth. And a lot of youth-led entities, even in that space, tend to bring in the voice of children under 18 and kind of warp that into youth voice and present it not really as a children's voice. So it's very important that I think there are a lot of non-youth adults who listen to youth and try to present that, but you can't help but to take children or youth voice and imply your own opinion without having youth directly represent that. So I think it's important to really build capacity and offer mentorship to build up the next generation, whether it be children or youth, so that they can directly voice their opinion for themselves.
Definitely. I'm wondering also what role you think education and empowerment play in raising awareness about climate change among youth.
Right. So education, first of all, you got to know in order to care or to be able to do something. So I think general awareness and education on any issue is the first step. But the empowerment is not only in form of knowledge dissemination, but also for skills building and capacity building, so that young people can directly voice their opinion and be part of the solution, as opposed to just being aware of it, becoming glum, and then complaining all the time. But that's what happens when it ends with education. But if you empower their skills to be able to act on those issues and provide them a meaningful engagement space and platform, then I think that's where young people can really blossom into being the change makers that they aspire to be. And we obviously can't ignore the reality of lack of funding and resources for young people to be able to do that as well. But I'm sure that's a different discussion we can have.
That's a continuous discussion, yes. I think, that we're always having. Shaquille, I'm wondering if you could speak to this as well. What role do you think education and empowerment have in raising climate awareness among young people?
Like my partner here, my co-partner here said, the role that education will play in terms of SDGs or changing climate change will be to educate young people in terms of this is that. Well, I just serve as the co-moderator for the regional breakout session for the UN ECOSOC. And in the Caribbean session, we identified that there's a learning gap, or there's a skill gap between young people in the Caribbean understanding what the SDGs are. And I think for us, we should try to educate young people in terms of what the SDGs are, where they can understand it and materialize the actual concept of what the SDGs are, so they can possibly work towards implementing it. But the empowerment aspect comes in where we actually use to say that education, actually train them and build a capacity to actually be a part of the discussions or be a part of the engineering that actually goes behind goes behind actually accomplishing the SDGs or actually mitigating climate change in the Caribbean. Yeah.
I think I would definitely like to know more about both of you. You've travelled here from the Caribbean and from Canada to be a part of this global conversation. At more of a personal level or a local level, what are some initiatives that you're working on at the moment?
Okay, so for me, I was the chairperson for the Caribbean Regional Youth Council on the SDGs and the climate change. Right now, my major focus is training and building capacity for young people in the Caribbean, especially in our youth networks like our national youth councils and other youth-led organizations, where they can actually learn more about the SDGs and especially climate change, and not only learn more through education on the SDGs and climate change, but also be empowered to actually go home and actually work towards actually achieving the SDGs. So for me personally, right now, I think my major goal when I return back home or return back to the Caribbean is actually to establish a program that I can say carry back home to the Caribbean, which will serve as a training skills workshop, more so, where we can say educate young people on the SDGs, and not only educate young people in SDGs, but actually teach them in terms of this is plausible solutions for you actually to go back home and actually work towards achieving the SDGs in your home countries.
Steve, when I Googled you, I found a few results. One said that you were a 23-year-old climate activist. Another one said you're a 24-year-old climate activist. I'm wondering, how old are you? And what are some initiatives that you're working on now?
That's an excellent question. I should go back and update that because I just turned 25.
Oh, wow.
So both of them are outdated now. I'm 25, and I guess the initiatives that we're working on, we have two, one with the universities and one with the high schools. The university one, we focus on the holistic approach to solving climate change, which we really look at in the holistic lens of the Sustainable Development Goals. And the SDGs, just from what we can see here, climate change is not the only problem in this world, nor is it the most important problem in this world, but it is the most urgent problem in this world.
And it can have a lot of flow-on effects to other problems as well. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, we literally are the final generation who can solve climate change. If it goes beyond, there is no more future generation. So it is absolutely critical that we solve climate change within this generation, but there are other challenges beyond that. So looking at the holistic aspect of it, and in fact, we actually launched our impact report for that university training that we did in 2017, where we engaged almost 7,000 students that came from 77 different universities across the country. And from there, what we learned is that 91% of the attendees wanted that they wish they had learned about the SDGs before coming to university. So we've launched something called the 3% Project, where we're going across Canada 5 times in the next 2 years to engage 1 million high school students in 600 high schools. So that started about 3 weeks ago, and we're mainly focusing on rural and small communities. So we're driving a lot up in the mountains and kind of the most remote regions, and it's really good to see the solutions of climate change coming from young people in all areas across the country.
That is certainly a lot of people.
Yes, and that's where 3% comes from. It's about 3% of the Canadian population.
Right, wow. Yes. You guys are both doing such fantastic work. That's all we have time for today, but for people following along, you can continue this conversation with all of us on Twitter. Shaquille, Knowles and Steve Lee, thank you very much.
Thank you.